You are tuning into Teaching Trailblazers with Chris from Education to the Core. In this episode, we will be chatting with Rufus Lott about restorative practices. Rufus is a consultant from Southern Texas, and he is a guru when it comes to building positive relationships and restorative practices. If this is your first time hearing about Education to the Core, you landed in the right spot. At ETTC, we want to make sure you not only have the best resources created by master teachers, but we want to be with you every step of the way, guiding you in your classrooms, so you can not only be there for your students, but you can have a better work-life balance. Make sure to subscribe to the ETTC YouTube channel, like this video, and visit educationtothecore.com for tons of teaching tips, resources, and freebies, which are updated daily. Below this video, you will find the links that all the ETTC has to offer, as well as any links we may be discussing during this vlog. Welcome back, Trailblazers. Thank you. You're tuning into Teaching Trailblazers with Chris from ETTC. I have the pleasure of sitting down with Rufus Lott, who is coming from Southern Texas to join us today. And Rufus is an expert at restorative practices. Thank you, Rufus. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, all the way from South Texas. It's a good day today. I'm excited.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us. I'm really lucky to kind of sit down and pick your brain a little bit today. So when I was kind of introducing you, I spoke about restorative practices. So kind of before we jump into that mindset and dialogue there, I would love just to take a little bit of time to get to know you a little bit better, of kind of how you got into education, and in particular, what made you kind of gear towards restorative practices.
Well, how I got into education is an interesting story in itself. I come from a family of educators. Both of my parents, my grandmother, you name it, we were involved in the educational system. And I kind of saw that growing up. And at one point in time, I decided I wanted nothing to do with it. And so I started off, ironically, as a communications major, wanting to do mass marketing and that sort of thing. And I got the opportunity one summer as a broke college kid needing some work needing to make some money to find work at a after not like a recreation thing that was happening for kids in the neighborhood in the summer at one of our local community colleges. And so I got in and I started working with the kids, and there was something about that look on a kid when they got a concept, or that look on a kid when you made a connection with them. And I don't know, man, I guess it was just in me. And so that next semester I went back to the University of Texas, San Antonio, where I graduated. And I switched, I took that year and, threw it away, and I switched my major and I rolled with it. And it was good. And I remember specifically wanting to work with middle school kids. I don't know why. I love middle school. A lot of people say middle school is like the toughest years for students. Me personally, I love middle school, and I love that age group of kid. And so I wanted to go to the middle school. And when I got my student teaching letter, they placed me in elementary school in fifth grade. And I was like, I didn't really want to do it. I kind of wanted to argue the point, but there was this long drawn out process to kind of get it changed. And so I said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And so I got in with those fifth grade students, and I just fell in love with elementary school. And so I decided that I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And so when I finished, I got my first, teaching job as a fourth grade teacher. And by far, shout out to my fourth grade teachers out there. Fourth grade by far, to me, is the best grade level to teach. They're still kind of young, and we can mold them a little bit. But at the same time, they're a little older, so you can have some deeper conversations with them. And so, yeah, I got involved like that and started teaching fourth grade, fifth grade. I went back to the middle school, started teaching sixth grade just by chance. Myself and a few other gentlemen that had gone to the same middle school we went to the same middle school that we went back and taught at. And so the principal at the time, she had heard that some of us had gotten degrees, and we were coming back to the neighborhood to do some stuff. And she agreed to hire us if we all came back. She was having some issues with some of her boys and stuff. And so we did. And I got an opportunity to do that. And the crazy part about it was I honestly felt that I was only having an impact with the students that I had on a daily basis. And that's really why I wanted to be in middle school, because I felt like I had more kids on a roster, if you will. And so, in elementary school, you might have 25, 30 kids, and you just deal with that. I felt like I had impact with them. But ultimately, I just wanted more kids. I wanted to have more of an impact with students. And so I just wanted more kids. And so I decided to get a degree in administration. That way I could have a whole grade level of kids, a whole, alphabet section of kids. And so, yeah, I got my first opportunity. I was young, like 27, 28 years old, to become assistant principal in San Antonio Independent School District in San Antonio. And I did that for a little bit. And then some budget cuts and some other things hit, and I decided to leave one district and move to across town to another district. And this is where my restorative journey begins. I got placed at a school that was struggling, was on the verge of being closed by the Texas Education Agency, and we were missing all the numbers that we needed to hit. And I was able to work with a pretty visionary principal at the time, and not really knowing what we were going to do, we discovered through some conversations and some work with the university this concept. And at the time they were calling it restorative justice, and they were doing a lot of it out in San Francisco with San Francisco United. And we didn't know what it was. We just figured that we had to do something different because what we were doing wasn't working. So if you Google Ed White, you can probably read the reports from the University of Texas at Austin, who actually did the study alongside our pilot. And so, yeah, I was just blessed to be involved with that process. I learned a lot about that process. I continue to learn a lot about that process as we work through it now, even today. But yeah, man, that's just a little bit about how I got involved with it. I didn't know anything about it prior. I don't think any of us really did, especially as it came to Texas from the West Coast. And we started calling it restorative discipline. And then we found that wasn't the best way to talk about it or to brand it. And so lately I've just been calling it restorative practices or relational practices, because it truly is about relationships, both building them holistically, but also maintaining them. And then when they break down, essentially working on repairing them so that we can get back to relationship. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit about myself. I think this is year 14 for me in education. I started in 2007. So that's crazy now that I say that.
It's really funny that, yeah, when you kind of say that and you really start thinking about it, and when somebody actually asks you, you're like, oh wait, wow, it's our, because I'm in the same exact boat. I also started in 2007, and it's whoa, like, yeah, it's been a journey and a process, and it's like, it doesn't seem that long, but when you sit down and think about it, you're like, wow. And
it's also mind blowing. It's also mind blowing when you run into them at the Walmart or one of the malls or whatever, and you see them, and some of my kids, they've already graduated from school, and you're like, man, I had impact on you when you were like 9 years old, and now you're 21, 22. And it's just interesting. Some of them are married, some of them are in the military. They're all over the world. Like it's crazy. They've come back and they try to befriend you on Facebook and stuff. And I keep up with some of those like kids from my very first class, and it's pretty cool to see that. And then they come back and they thank you for all the things. And so I'm on that part of it now. Where we laid the foundations, and now we're seeing some of the fruit of our labor, if you will. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I was always told kind of by these veteran teachers where it's really fun and it's cool when you're getting their kids then in class, but as soon as the grandkids hit, that's your time to out the door. It's like, no, okay. We got too long now to go. It's kind of interesting. You said that you started your teaching career kind of at a school where you actually went to. And I think that's really neat of how that pairs with what you're calling and referring to as relational practices, which I love that you're calling it that. And but when we talk about that, restorative practices. So you said it's all about building relationships. And I think it's a neat aspect of it where you truly understand and know the community, and that you're going into teaching of where you went to school and kind of where you grew up and where you live. So it's really neat that you had that opportunity and that your students had that opportunity to have that relationship with you, because you truly understood kind of the community, the culture of the school. And I think that was just really neat to kind of have for your students.
Yeah, and it gave us, and I tell you, it gave us the ultimate legitimacy for what we were talking about. Because it wasn't just me, it was several of us, and there were some female teachers as well. And she was able to put us all back in those same schoolhouse. And so when we talked about, like, you can make it out of this neighborhood, when we talked about, we were the product of the school, and so it gave us the ultimate legitimacy. And we jumped in with the students already with a bunch of just relationship investment, and we didn't even have to do much just because we were the product. And so it gave us some legitimacy, especially as we were working with them, and it made them pay attention a little more. It gave them some true understanding of what they could do if they just put in a little bit of work. And so, yeah, I agree 100%. And I think sometimes in education that's missing a little bit. I think people travel and they go different places. I even think sometimes in school districts, we structure things in a way where maybe we don't give a certain principal all the autonomy to do what they need to do with their community. And so it makes it tough when you're fighting that, and then you're also trying to fight, bureaucracy and all other things. It makes it tough for educators to do what they can do for their students. And so, yeah, I think it plays a big part. And if you're an educator on the line today and you get the opportunity to go back and work with students, or work in an area, or work with students that are similar to you, you can relate to, I think it's important for them if this is your passion.
Yeah. And not just the relation, but as you said, like that role model of, hey, we could definitely, go beyond the area, do this, do that. You can do anything that you want to do, because here I am. And we all are, as this kind of cohort coming into that building of, we did it. We want to come back and give back to the community because we got so much out of it. So we wanted to kind of share our talents and experience. So generally speaking, we kind of touched on a little bit of relational practices, restorative practices, kind of generally speaking, because I know when you started it, it was very, very new coming from the West Coast, as you said. And I still feel some teachers might not truly know what restorative practices may refer to. I think a lot of us would even be doing it in our own classrooms and not even know it. So kind of what are, like generically speaking, like kind of what are restorative practices, if we had to kind of put it all in a nutshell?
Got you. Well, I'll say that I think everybody is doing it. And I just don't think anybody's really put a name to it. I think we do it in various stages. I know that, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, as I was, coming up in the profession, maturing in the profession, I know there was this big, huge push for, building relationships with your students. And, it was this push. But I don't think that's anything old. I said a minute ago, I come from a family of educators, and I pick my dad's brain a lot. He was a longtime head coach here in San Antonio. And he talks about his students the same way that I talk about my students. And he started teaching in the early 80s. So I don't think that it's anything new. And some people kind of laugh and they're like, you just figured out how, talking about me, right? You just figured out how to put it in a way where people understand it. But if I had to, I guess, put it in a box, I really don't like to put things in a box, but if I really had to just kind of surmise it, I think it's really not something tangible. It's a process. And it's something that we do with one another. And it's not necessarily just for school. And I try to get people to understand that it's about people. And it's interesting, we don't deal with static commodity in our profession. We deal with human beings as our commodity. This is what we're trying to produce, if you will. But that commodity isn't static sitting on a shelf. It has emotions. It's got feelings. It's got things happening to it under the surface that we may not even know. And so I have to approach that commodity a little differently than I do just some random product sitting on a shelf. I have to understand that student's emotional intelligence. I have to have some emotional intelligence about myself, and I have to be willing to show empathy and teach empathy and work through some of those key concepts. And so for me, it's just really about people. And I think if I really had to break it down to a few sentences, I would say this, and I've been telling people this. To me, if I have to really sum it up, I would say that teaching is just good parenting. We're just being asked to do it for other people's biological children. And I think that's how I've approached it lately. I look at students, I look at the situations as though it was my children in those situations, or if it was my children, trying to learn from this scenario. And I think where we make a mistake with it, and I think this has been the mistake over time with it. And honestly, this isn't really a fairly, I mean, they've been doing this in California since the mid 80s. You know, it goes all the way back to the Sioux Indian tribes. I mean, it's a very indigenous process. This is how they dealt with conflict and confrontation. We've just taken it and kind of groomed it and made it in a way where it's palatable in the school building, and where people are able to connect using, you know, some of the protocols that we've developed, but also be able to fix problems using some of the protocols and using them the correct way, in a way that they can sustain those relationships. And so it's really just that. It's an opportunity for everybody to be a good parent. It's an opportunity for everybody to think outside the box. And it's an opportunity for everybody to make kids feel like they belong. And I think that is the fight against, and this is where like traditional schooling and consequencing and all that stuff meets this idea of this relational model. The more that I kick you out, the more you're going to want to be with us. That just doesn't work that way. The more that I kick you out, the more you're saying that I don't need you, or I don't care about you, or I don't whatever. And so we're sending the wrong signal through it. And so to me, it's just that. It's how am I in relationship with you? How are you in relationship with me? And then how are you in relationship with your peers? And is that great? And when it's great, it's good. And when it breaks down, do we have protocols to fix it so that everybody can go down the same train? So that's my long answer to your question.
Yeah, no, I think it was like just perfect. It was just filled with like so many good little things that I would love to kind of pick apart that answer as we kind of continue a little bit. And I think you bring up an excellent point that I feel a lot of educators kind of need to hear. Is this idea of discipline and suspensions. And you kind of just said it right there and I 100% agree. It's one of those things where, let's face it, suspensions for the most part do not work. They don't match kind of the function of the student's behavior, because sometimes they are trying to escape. So what do? We kick them out. And then on the flip side, like you said, what does that tell the student of, well, you know, we're not trying. We don't want to know, you know, what you're dealing with kind of prior to school that might make you be acting like this. So it's like, okay, we're not dealing with your nonsense today. Get back out the door. So I feel in generally, like, as you were saying, this whole idea of relationships and stemming from restorative practices or restorative discipline, even back then, it kind of stems from this suspension and disciplinary actions. I love also that you kind of said that you personally, you don't like putting things in a box. And I think it naturally kind of goes with your own work and research. So you came up with an outside of the box approach to building and sustaining relationships. So I would love to kind of like start the dialogue of like how you came up with that practices, and then kind of connect your 3 phases that you were kind of doing within your work there.
Yeah. So 2 things. You flipped something, a switch with me a few minutes ago when you use that word discipline, right? And I think this is important. And I want to say this to someone who may be struggling with that idea. I had a call yesterday with a school that I support out in Eastern Atlanta, around the Georgia area. And they were caught up on that idea of how does this mesh with the idea of discipline, because in their mind, they're like, well, the discipline is going out the window because we're replacing it with something different. And I think one of the reasons why I found so much legitimacy in this process with people is that I'm a huge proponent of consequences. And I think we have to put that out there. Like, this isn't a replacement for consequences, okay? It's just now we're able to do those consequences, but continue to show kids dignity, love, admiration, and respect through those consequences, if that makes sense. And so I really want to just talk about the word discipline for a second, because I think in our profession, we use it and we throw it out a lot, right? Kids need discipline. You know, and you can't even like smile and say that word, right? It just has this very negative connotation. It's just like discipline, you know, it's what it is. And people have a lot of emotions behind that word, especially in our profession. Like, kids need more discipline, or this school has no discipline, or I need to go to another place because they have better discipline, or whatever that is. But the interesting part about it is that everybody can control discipline, and this is why. If you look up the word discipline in the dictionary, in layman's terms, really, and not even layman's terms, the definition of it is to teach or to train. That's the definition of the word discipline, and it makes perfect sense to me. I think that's what we're teachers, right? We discipline all day. And that's why, when you think about it, that's why like our academic pieces are, the 5 core subjects or whatever, that's why they're called disciplines, because we're teaching and training our kids in mathematics. We're teaching and training our kids in reading. We're teaching, you get it. And so when I think about this word discipline, well, it's just to teach or train. And so like, if you have a discipline referral, it makes perfect sense. That referral should be designed in a way to teach up and train up our students in the expectations we want them to meet. It should not be an inaction to an action, meaning it should not be the first step in me putting a kid out. If I'm going to actually have a true discipline referral, then we're going to have to be developing strategies in order to like teach up and train up the kids. And it's a process to do that. And I think when we think about discipline, it's like, we have these stair steps of things, you go from, step 1 to step 2 to out the door. Well, the issue with that is we don't do that in academics. And the stark comparison to that is this: can you imagine if we kicked kids out of our class because they couldn't read? Like, it would be an overthrowing of our educational system. You would make the news, like, get out because you can't convert a decimal to a fraction. Like, no, like, we recognize that a kid is going to come to those concepts at a certain pace or a certain level. And so, we've been out and we've been talking about this, and I'm going to segue into, this out of the box approach, because it's really just differentiated discipline. And it's no different than what we do in academics. We differ all the time in academics. We'll stay before school, we'll come after school, we'll change the way that we teach things, we'll find different manipulatives, we'll do whatever we will do under the sun to make sure a kid gets what they need academically. But as soon as they can't behave and, it becomes an issue, then it's like, get out, versus let's nurture, let's discipline, right? Let's teach and let's train. And so when I started thinking about this idea of this outside the box approach, what I really wanted to articulate to people, or to put out there, and what really leads my workshops, is this idea that we already do some of these things. Number one, we just have to take them, polish them, and put some systems behind it so that it becomes universal and everybody's working towards the same goal. And so, people always say, that's like I think that's the number one question that a new teacher may get asked in an interview. It's like, how do you build relationships with kids? And so what I set out to try to do is develop a sort of like a relationship action plan, if you will. And so somebody can truly articulate, like, this is how I do this with my students. And so that's where that 3-pronged concept kind of came from, that connect, correct, and consequence. And so it's like, I use the care plan, right? I circle, I use effective language, I use a relationship agreement in my classroom. And I'm keen to my students' emotional intelligence because I work through mine and we teach that. And so I circle with my kids so that I learn about them, they learn about me, and they learn about one another. I use effective language and I talk to my kids a little differently, both to de-escalate with them, but also to lay more relationship investments with them. I use the relationship agreement or the treatment agreement so that we can truly have conversations about treatment and what that looks like between people, because we are human beings and we have to talk about those things. And then of course, E being that emotion. So thinking about that, so if you ask me, if the newscast were to come to my campus, if I was the leader of a campus, I would say, yeah, here we connect with our students. And then, when those connections break down, we have protocols where we correct with our students, we fix those relationships, and eventually we choose consequences that make sense for the situation. We choose consequences that are meaningful, they're logical, they make sense for the situation, all so that we can get back to relationshiping again, or also that we can get back to connecting. So it's a cyclical process. We connect, we correct, we consequence, and then we go back to connecting again. We correct because it's going to break down because we're human beings, and then we just go back. And so it's a cyclical process. And so I wanted people to be able, because there's a lot of us who do this very naturally. It's just who we are. And there's a lot of us who struggle with it for whatever reason. And I wanted to be able to try to give somebody a foundation who maybe struggles to say, this is a starting point for me. And as I get more comfortable, then my kids are going to see me different, but I'm also going to be able to get creative on my own and just move past that boring, mundane student survey that I give them at the very beginning of the year to learn what kind of, favorite color or favorite food they may have. This is an ongoing process. And then those of us who do it very naturally, well, when I arm you with some extra little pieces to put on your tool belt, you just become an extra rock star. And so that's kind of what was driving the force behind putting something on paper that was tangible, even though I don't like putting things in boxes. I remember a long time ago when I got and we have the gifted and talented program. Down here, you have to get a certification to teach those students. And so as an addendum to your certification. And so I remember them saying a long time ago, if you teach your class to the gifted and talented student, the other students will come with you. And they may come with you at your own pace, but it's because the rigor and the level of your class is at such a higher level that they don't have a choice but to come with you. And so that was my process, or my thought, my thinking as I went through it. If I plan and I work hard to get those that are maybe struggling with it up to speed, the ones that are already with it, they're going to get extra tools. And so that was kind of my driving force behind it. I don't think it's evolutionary. Like I said, I think it's things that we're already doing. I just kind of packaged it in a way to get people to understand that this is something that, number one, needs to be done if I'm not doing it, and here are some tools to kind of help you through it.
Yeah, and I love not only the cycle of it, but I am such a behavioralist at heart, and that was kind of like my research as I progressed in education. It's all about behavior for me. And I really appreciate kind of how you were discussing discipline and how to pair it so well with academics and kind of this MTSS kind of whole framework in a way of systems of kind of, it's the same outline of, laying those foundations and the framework of building and scaffolding upon kind of just the outcomes of students and their expectations, and modeling and practicing those, and kind of just, as you said, connecting, correcting, and then kind of that consequence phase to cycle back to begin. I think it makes so much sense in a way. And it, like you said, it's so not anything new, but it's just so outside of the box, and it's just so neat. And I'm latching onto this really hardcore right now. So I think also, as you were kind of talking, something like popped into my head too, of kind of making sure that all the kids belong in the classroom, and kind of with this student voice in a way. And automatically, another big thing that I'm super interested, like reading a lot on and listening to a lot of podcasts, is this idea of equity and how to be more equitable in your classroom. And I think this pairs so well with that mindset of equity, of kind of allowing and sharing everyone's voice and making sure that each one is heard and building those relationships. So how do you think equity kind of plays into like the cycle of your approach as well as restorative practices?
Well, I guess I got a couple ideas. I think the whole idea behind even going back to, it's in a lot of parts of the country, they still refer to it as restorative justice. And I think it's the ultimate way for a person to earn their redemption, when it comes down to them harming another person. And by harming, I don't mean physically, but that could be emotionally, that could be, when you're in conflict and confrontation with somebody. Or maybe you've stolen something from somebody. It's the whole idea of making it right. And I think that drives a lot of it. And so, our thing, and why we didn't want to call it restorative justice, was because it had that word justice. And to me, it's kind of what we're trying to not do in school, right? We're trying to be the anti-school to prison pipeline. And that word justice just screams Justice Department, just screams, juvenile hall. It screams all that. So that's why we chose not to do that. And we went with restorative discipline in a way, because that idea of discipline is to teach and to train, and it kind of molded well. But I'll tell you the real reason why there's been a big push nationwide with this over probably the last 15 years or so is because of the disparity in or the disproportionality levels. Once the Breaking School Rules study came out, and people started really looking at how suspensions were affecting Black and Brown communities, and once that came to light, and then when Obama was in the White House, and when Arnie Duncan and those individuals at the federal level really began to pay attention as to what was truly happening with that idea of the school to prison pipeline, and how we were leaving a whole generation of students behind, all because of zero tolerance. And so I think it's ripe, and I say ripe because of where we are right now as a nation, and where we are right now with thinking about equality, where we're thinking about every student truly getting a fair chance and a fair opportunity. And I think it's like I said, it's not cutting edge, but I think there's going to be some really strong opportunities with it to continue those conversations. And I also think that since we have a new administration, it's going to be some continuation of what was happening, prior to the previous administration with My Brother's Keeper, and a lot of those initiatives, because it's going to matter. I just hope that this time, if it plays itself out the way that I think it's going to play itself out, that the emphasis isn't so much on reducing suspensions or reducing expulsions. What I would like to see the emphasis on is creating equitable environments for our Black and Brown students. We want to see them excel just as our white students do. And it's interesting because yes, we want to see our students for who they are, but at the end of the day, they all need to be excelling because they are the next generation of students. And so it's those small little things that have suppressed a certain population. And I'll tell you, one of the things that we're working on, and this is kind of hot off the presses, right? We've been doing this for the last couple of months, is if you've seen my publication, right, where we talk about the connect, correct, consequence, and we talk about how the proactive plan is really that care plan, CARE. This summer, going into the early part of the fall, we toyed with adding an S to it, and I think that's going to be our push as we go through this professional development season and going into this summer. And that S really just stands for sensitivity. And so our CARES plan now involves sensitivity. And I think it's key because in light of all the things that happened this summer, not naturally in the nation with, Mr. Floyd and all these things that were happening in our society that our kids were in quarantine watching. I felt like they were going to come back to school with a chip on their shoulder and a lot of questions about things. And they were way more aware now than maybe they were in the past. And I think that we're going to be in a position to where they felt like they had a voice and they were going to say some things. And I just needed my educators to be prepared to offer that platform. And I think Circle is the best way to do it. But thinking about, racial sensitivity, societal sensitivity, thinking about all those things you can put that sensitivity next to, I think it's gonna play itself out. So this process is the ultimate process of equity. It's the ultimate process of making sure that kids get what they need. And it's the ultimate process to make sure that we make kids feel like they belong. And it's interesting, if you go, you said you're a behavioralist, right? If you go all the way back to Maslow's and 101, right? Psychology 101, you look at the hierarchy of needs or the hierarchy of achievement. Well, you will never reach that fourth tier, I think it's the fourth tier of achievement, if you don't have a long-lasting intimate relationships. It's a precursor to achievement, along with my physiological needs and my needs for safety and all that goes with it. And so we reach that certain tier of need, or these intimate relationships and needing to feel loved. I'll never reach that idea of success if I don't solidify those relationships. And so it's biology. It's what we've been taught. It's just now we have to put it into play, and we have to remember those things. And so when a kid messes up, we don't want to take them and send them away for 5, 7, 10 days. We want to figure out what's the real issue. How can we begin to teach up and train up, right? Discipline the student so that they're not continuing to make the same mistakes. And even if they do make the mistake again, we're going to use that as an anchor chart because it's a process. And I just go back to academics. How many times does a kid make a mistake in an algebra sequence before they truly get it? And so they do it over and over and over. I did it over and over and over. You did it over and over and over and over. Practice makes perfect. And so it's the same process for me. And so, yeah, I think it plays itself right into it. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for us to use a process like this so that we can be called a woke teacher, so that we can understand what's truly happening, especially if I'm teaching in an area, if I'm teaching students that don't necessarily look like me or come from the same background as I do, or some of the same areas, I have to have an understanding. And I think this process provides that.
And you kind of like being this woke teacher, I think, especially, and we briefly touched on it in like this world of COVID, and many educators across the country and world, have some form of hybrid or totally virtual. So I feel like Maslow's hierarchy comes into play because it's really taking that steps back, as you were saying, in that, first couple tiers of, building those relationships. And so many of us are losing those relationships because we're quarantined at home. We're not out building relationships with others. We're not connecting as we normally were. So, and you kind of also brought up a point too of students and children seeing and being exposed to a little bit more of the social media and the media aspect of the current events in the past, few years with the past administration and just movements. So as we're returning to brick and mortar, how do you think all of this kind of comes together of the importance of, where should teachers start with these dialogues? Where should we kind of go back into your cycle? Kind of how should teachers kind of approach all of this extra coming back into their classrooms, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that's something for us to begin to really start thinking about now. And I go back to this idea of a lot of our students prior to the pandemic were already dealing with a lot of things, and they were coming to our school buildings, and they were, because they didn't really have a articulate way to talk about how they felt, or talk about how, or constructive rather way to talk about what was going on with them. A lot of the things, a lot of those emotions or behaviors, those emotions played themselves out in adverse behaviors. And so kids who were anxious, depressed, kids who were, just struggling all around, you find that those students are the ones who tend to act out the most, because it's almost like a cry for help, because they don't have the words or they don't have the opportunities to be able to truly put those things out. And so behavior is just another form of communication. And so when kids act up, we got to start thinking like, what is really happening? And so I think for those students who are already struggling pre-pandemic, they're going to come back post-pandemic times 10. Okay, they're going to come back. Yeah, they're going to come back needing even more support. And I think this is where we have this awesome opportunity, because we've almost spent a year. I don't want to say doing nothing, but we almost spent a year. Like we have this buffer moment where we have the old way, and then we have this new way that's coming with the pandemic in between. And I think this is the perfect opportunity to say we're going to do something different, because everything that we've done this past year has been different. And so I think we already got people's mindset thinking differently, but I think there is going to have to be an emphasis on our kids' emotional well-being. I think we're going to have to slow down with our students. I do a lot of reading articles and different things like that, and a lot of our kids who were on level or on path with their age and grade and all that kind of stuff, they're going to come back to us at least a year behind. Those are students like my students years ago who were already in 6th grade but still reading on a 3rd grade level, which is a lot of the students in our country. They're going to come back times double what they were already behind. And so it's going to be a lot of work from the adult side and from the child side. But I think none of that academic stuff is going to matter until we figure out how to deal with all of the emotional stuff and all of the relational pieces, right? It's like that saying says, there's no significant learning going to occur without significant relationships. And so we have to spend like true, we have solid time. We've got to make that investment, and we have to see it as an investment that we're going to draw from later on. Okay, it's not an expenditure, right? It's an investment. We're going to spend this time. Yes, we're going to be losing some of those academic moments or whatnot, but we're going to spend this time doing it because those academic moments are going to mean so much more. And so if you ask me where I think we should start, I think it's there. I think whether you use Circle or whether you use some other protocol, if you have something that really works for you, then I think you're going to have to start there, and you're going to have to do it with regularity. You can't just, do it. Oh, well, I did it the first week of school. That's great. And then go back into what I'm doing. Like, we're going to have to spend significant portions of our day, significant amounts of time doing it. And it's not that difficult to do. I was talking with somebody not too long ago, and I was like, listen, they're like, well, the administrator was struggling in some implementation and trying to figure out what their new bell schedules are going to look like, because people are developing their schedules already. And I said, look, it's really easy. I had to ask you, I asked them this question. I said, how much time do you think your teacher is quote unquote wasting, right, during any particular one of your lessons in elementary school? And they've said, well, with materials and just kids moving around and stuff, somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes probably. And I'm like, yeah. I said, I think research says in a 45-minute class, only 27 minutes of that class is really spent teaching. That means 18 minutes of it is doing something else. And so I said, so why don't you just do this? If you're going to invest that time, why don't you just pull 5 minutes from each one of your core subjects? And I was like, and magically you've created 25 minutes every morning for your teachers to sit and have conversations with their students where they can learn about them, they can learn about the teacher, and then they can learn about one another. It's that simple. We just have to be willing to do it and then see it through. You understand what I'm saying? And so I think we've got to start there. I think there's a whole proactive piece to it, because if we don't do that, what we're going to see is all of those things I just talked about: the anxiety, the compulsive behavior, the depression, all those things. They're going to play themselves out in adverse behaviors. And now we're going to be left picking up the pieces, and we're going to be doing it backwards when we should have started connecting first, so that when they break down, then we're able to have a relationship to come back to. And so it just goes back to like this: you can never fix anything that you've never had, if that makes sense. Like, I would love to fix up like a old 57 Chevy or a 64 Impala, something like that, and restore it back to its originality. Problem is, I don't have one. You understand what I'm saying? And so if I had one, right, then maybe I could take it back to its glory. And you think about tangibly, you think about the relationship that same way. I cannot fix it if I've never had it. And so I've got to spend time having it or working towards it, so that when it does break down, I can go back to it. And so I think that's where we're going to have to start. But I don't think it's anything new. We just have to invest. We just have to say, this is what we're going to do before we do these other things. But that's revolutionary in itself, because everybody's going to say, well, they're behind in academics, and day one we got to start catching them up. And I'm like, good luck with that, because yeah, you may make some grounds with a few, but you're also going to be climbing an uphill battle, because all of the students that we've neglected on that emotional side, they're coming to school with much more baggage, and we've got to figure out how to help them hang that baggage at the door so that we can work with them.
Yeah. And I love the focus that you put on of putting in the time and really making it part of your daily routine. Because I feel so many teachers sometimes, like in this idea of exactly what we're talking about, social emotional learning. It's these SEL activities of, building those relationships, discussing strengths and weaknesses, goal setting, those types of important details of, as we had this whole conversation of building relationships, is kind of at the forefront, as you said, of, prior to academics, we really need to focus on these. And I think you hit it right on the head there of taking those 5 minutes of all that non-teaching time of transitions, moving around, getting out workbooks, getting out this, is, I hear so many times of teachers, well, we can't fit it in. We can't do it because we don't have time. And you got it right there of just taking all the little bits of time throughout the day and just focusing and doing it, because it's so important now more than ever. I feel, as you said too, is we can't wait for the guidance counselor to come in once a week or once every other week to do a lesson on, conflict resolution, or how to, build peer relationships or career readiness skills. It's really up to us as educators and teachers to build those activities into our daily routines.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad you said something about that time aspect. Put it this way, and we're not getting any more of it, right? I mean, it's 8 to 3 o'clock, right? We're not getting any more. And let's just be honest, right? If we went from a 24-hour day to, let's say, a 30-hour day, I would just find other things to fit in for those 6 hours. Like I'm always going to have that. Let's say I'm out of time, or I don't have enough time. The thing about time is, I don't know if it's about time. And if there's any administrators who are listening to the podcast or thinking about doing this, I think what we're going to have to do, and I know if I was in the position to be leading a campus in the present, I would be trying to alleviate the pressure. And I think that's where people confuse time and pressure. It's like, I have the pressure to get all these things in. And so naturally I have to say, because there's so much, I don't have enough time. And I think it's interesting as an educational leader, if I alleviate some of the pressure, if I give my staff members the power of permission to say, I want you to do this. I need you to do this. Your kids need you to do this. And I'm okay with you stealing a little bit of time here, or, you know, maybe not teaching that science lesson today, but spending some time doing this, because eventually when you do teach that science lesson, it's going to mean so much more. Like, I think from the educational leaders standpoint, we've got to bless our teachers with the power of permission to be able to do it. Because I've come to this conclusion that most of the people who got into this profession, who are in the classroom doing a bunch of the groundwork, we're in this profession because we believe in it. We believe in kids, and we love what we do. And most of the time, we just, all of the time, right? We want to please our administration, we want to please our communities, our parents, we want our kids to succeed, and that's what drives us to do this. But we also, you know, sometimes we get a bad taste in our mouth. It's because we feel like, I want to do this, or I want to be creative in my classroom, and we feel like we're stifled by bureaucracy or scope and sequence or whatever it is. And so some of that originality is stolen from us. And I think this is an opportunity for my educational leaders, my principals, my administrators, to say, hey, I'm going to bless you with this. I need you to go out and do this, because if you don't, we're going to be fighting up against that. We're going to fight that battle anyway. And so I just wanted to say, it's like idea of time and pressure. And I think if you're a teacher and you're feeling that time crunch, it's not about the time crunch, because you're not getting any more time. It's just what it is. It's you're feeling a pressure moment. And you got to figure out how to maybe alleviate that pressure, or having somebody else alleviate that pressure for you, so that you can fit in what you need to fit in. So I just wanted to throw that in as an asterisk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a good asterisk and a good point, because as you kind of even brought up that chunk of time of actual true instruction throughout, like that 45-minute lesson, of how small it was. And I feel if we as educators, and myself included, if we don't take that, you know, direct instruction of these relationships and working out and all the non-academic side of things, that time of academics is even going to be shorter, because students are going to be, you know, displaying more behaviors, and it's going to be taking more time to, you know, really promote that self-awareness piece. So I think it's really important to take that time, because it's even going to get shorter of the instruction.
Well, 100% agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rufus, for really joining us. I've actually loved this dialogue, and I definitely want to go back to this cycle of your phases of, you know, connect, correct, consequence. If people are really interested in kind of not only your cycle, but then some more things and more publications or anything that you're coming out with, kind of what's the best avenue to reach you, kind of see what more, like if they're interested in workshops that you host, kind of where can they find that stuff?
Well, it's interesting. Like, right at the beginning, you called me an expert, and I do not want that label. Okay. I am not an expert, right? I am an educator, like any other educator who's just trying to do right for kids, and trying to figure things out. I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. I continue to make mistakes. I think at this point in time, what separates myself from maybe somebody who's watching this, I've been a restorative practitioner for some years now. And so I just have experience in the role. And that's really what separates you and I. I think our end goal is the same. And so, and I say all of that to say this, I'm extremely accessible. All right. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, or you got a question, or, you know, you want to shoot me an email or whatever, I think the easiest way to get a hold of me probably is through my website. And that's www.lottedU.com. And I'm pretty sure Chris will kind of put that up so that you can see that. I've got a contact us button, and it goes directly to my telephone, and I usually respond pretty quickly from there. But we also have the social medias. If you do Lott EDU or Lott Educational Consulting, will probably come up in one of the things. And if you just feeling old fashioned and you just want to go to the Google machine, you can just put Rufus Lott III, and you know, I Googled myself the other day, and I'm kind of proud to say I'm 3 pages deep. Yes.
There we go.
For a lot of reasons.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So I'm growing a little bit, right? But yeah, you can click on any one of those links, and you can find some things. I did publish a 6-page guide. It's got like everything that you need to know from A to Z about this idea of relational practice, or this outside the box approach. And you can either purchase that through my website, or you can go to NPR and get that. And so some of that stuff is out there. But like, again, you Google my name, those things will come up. But yeah, I maintain that accessibility for a reason, because I feel like if one conversation with one person who's interested is going to go back and impact one child, I've done my job. And I think that's where it's important. And I know at the beginning of the conversation, I talked a little bit about me wanting just more kids. That's why I wanted to become an administrator. That's why I wanted to become a principal. That's why at some point in time, my goal still is to be a superintendent of an urban school district. Like, give me 50, 60, 100,000 kids. Like, and I promise you we'll do something different with them. And I said that, and I think one of the coolest things that I've experienced over the last year, having been out doing workshops, having been out doing professional development, having been traveling and doing all these things, like, I'm able to work with the adults who are having the impact that I was having in the classroom with the kids. And so if I do a workshop with 100, 150 people in it, well, man, if they all have 100 kids, 50 kids on their caseload, I mean, how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids have I impacted through you? And I think that's what's really driving my work at the moment. And I think it's going to continue to drive my work as I try to make things easy for us to understand and try to do things that are outside the box. And so never think that any question is silly. Reach out, because if I can help you impact one kid, then man, I would sleep a whole lot better. I would feel so much better about what we're trying to accomplish. And so, yeah.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things, if one person has the question, you can bet that 5 other people have the same exact question. So and I do have to say thank you again. And I know you might not say that there, but I truly believe that you are an expert, sir. And the reasons for that is because exactly kind of you're in it for all the right reasons. You're not afraid, as you said, to make those mistakes, but learn from them. And in my eyes, that is, an expert. And the third down on the Google search doesn't hurt either. So I'm just going to put that out there as well. I think that has some credibility around it too. But I truly appreciate your time today of sitting down and chatting with us. I would love to welcome you back and pick your brain some more as we continue forward. And thank you so much for joining us today, Rufus. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think we should do a part 2. So yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Emily, and Education to the Core. I'm glad to know you guys, because you guys are way bigger than I am. Y'all are way bigger than I'll ever be.
No, absolutely, but thank you, and I'm putting you down for part 2. It's a deal.
All right.
So thank you so much, everybody, again, and we'll definitely be seeing Rufus very soon, I'm sure. Thank you, Teaching Trailblazers of Education to the Core, for joining Rufus Lott and me, Chris, for Restorative Practices. Make sure to like and share this video, as well as subscribe to this YouTube channel. We will be meeting with more teachers across all disciplines for support, strategies, and engaging activities that you can implement in your own classrooms. We would also love to hear from you in the comments down below. This channel and Education to the Core is all about helping you grow in your profession and to build this community together. Remember, be kind and be strong. I hope to see you again soon. Thanks.